Thanksgiving Phil Steele Plus tour. Now, as you know, the purpose of this tour, I designed Phil Steele Plus to give me all the information on all the games at my fingertips. I've opened up Phil Steele Plus to you guys. I want to make sure you utilize it as much as I do, and that's why I have the Phil Steele Plus tour. Plus, try to give you some free winners each and every week. I've got 8 selections for you today, complete with reasoning. So let's get rolling. Now, the Phil Steele Plus, just a note, is, of course, $49 right now. You just go to the homepage of philsteele.com right here, and then you go to the store right here. And Phil Steele Plus, let me go over to it right here, is just $49 for the rest of the year. Now, that'll get you all of the rest of November, all of December, all of January, all the way through the Super Bowl. Covers college, pro, FCS, everything. Just $49. You get that free with your inside the press box. But let's get on to your first game. Now, we just go to FBS info. We go to team pages. I always put the visitor on the left and the home team on the right. And here we got Penn State against Michigan. And this is a simple one. It's called my average game grade play. Now, if you watch these two teams this year, they're both very disappointing. Michigan is 2-3. And besides this Minnesota game where they look great, they have looked terrific. They lost to Michigan State. They got blown out by Indiana, Wisconsin, and barely got past Rutgers. Now, Penn State's 0-5, and everybody's equating them as one of the worst teams in the Big Ten, but they're not really one of the worst teams in the Big Ten. I mean, they did outgain Indiana by 277 yards. They only lost to Ohio State by 13. They outgained Maryland but lost. They outgained Nebraska by 200 yards and lost. And last week they took on a red-hot Iowa team, and in that game against Iowa, they gave up a 71-yard interception return for a touchdown. So they're driving down 34-21, trying to make it 34-28, and then the dreaded 14-point swing. Now, when I showed you that, it was right here. These boxes are courtesy of collegepressbox.com, and they are wonderful. They show you the scoring of each game, which is great. They give you the stats for each game, which is great. The individual leaders for each game, the defensive stats, who started the game. There's your drive charts, and then, of course, the play-by-play. And I do go through the single play-by-play of every single game out there, which is almost like watching a game. But I try to watch, of course, as many games as I can as well. And I sort of blend the two together. But this takes you all the way through the end of the game. So do make sure you check out these box scores right here. Here's your half times of the games. So you can see what the score was and what the yards were at the half for each game. But these average game grades out here are huge. And today I'll be tweeting out the average game grades top 20 on my Twitter at PhilSteele042. But the average game grades don't just count the score of the game. They take into account who the opponent was, what the yards were rushing and passing, what the defensive yards were rushing and passing, what the score was, adds it all together and gives you an individual game grade for the game. So Penn State so far this year is playing to 102.1 game grade. Surprising for an 0-5 team. That's number 29 in the country. Michigan, meanwhile, if we take a look at them, they are pretty much playing to their game grade at 2-3. They're playing to a 94.1 game grade and number 65. So this team's playing at 102. This one's at 94.1. Penn State is +2 in this game. Another thing you can look at is right here, the yards versus opponent averages. Now, Penn State gained 138 yards against Indiana, and Penn State gained 488 yards against Indiana, 138 yards above Indiana's defensive average. So in all the other games, Indiana's allowing 350 yards per game, but against Penn State, they allowed a 488, which is 138 above. And defensively, Indiana's averaging 432 yards per game. Penn State held them to 211. That's a plus 221. That's how these work over here. And then they add them up, and as you see, Penn State's in the positive in both. And Michigan is in the negative 68 under defense. They have allowed their opponents, like Rutgers last week, they gave up 482 yards. Rutgers only came in averaging 329 yards per game, and they gave them 482. That's 153 yards above their season average. Same thing with Michigan State. Gave them 449. Michigan State's averaging about 280 yards per game. And right here on the homepage of philsteele.com, we break it down. Under FBS info, you can get the opponent average versus opponent average. BYU's right now number 1. They're 230 yards above their opponent's average. Alabama, look at that. Cincinnati's up there. Western Michigan, bet you didn't see them up there. Wisconsin's still up there, even after last week's game. Clemson, Notre Dame. How about UCLA, a surprise up here at plus 164? But when we look at these two teams, Penn State comes in here, number 29. They're 95 yards above their opponent average. And then Michigan is way down here at number 89, right here. Excuse me, they are minus 48 yards per game against the opponent average. So do look at these. I look at them when I do every game. If you read inside the press box, I will note those on almost every single game because I've considered them valuable. The average game grades I consider valuable. And your first play today is Penn State +2 over Michigan. All right, let's get to your second game, and it's what I'm going to call the situational game. It's Texas State is taking on Coastal Carolina. Now, Coastal Carolina is on the road, so we're going to put them here on the left, and we're going to take Texas State, and we're going to put them on the right. Coastal Carolina, of course, off a big game last week. They just took on App State, and it was the game to determine who's going to basically win the Sun Belt or get to the Sun Belt Championship and take on Louisiana. But I think it's probably was the game to determine who wins it because they were the two best teams in the league. They won this game 34-23. Now, if you think it's a blowout, once again, check your box score out if you didn't watch the game. I'm sure a lot of you did watch the game. It got flipped to a major station. We see that App State led this thing 23-21. In fact, they led a good portion of the game, 17-9, 23-21. Coastal scores with 2:24 left in the game, and then the dreaded interception return for a touchdown with 1:20 left allowed Coastal Carolina to get the cover and win this game by 11. So the 34-23 is a bit misleading because App State led most of the game. If you look at the stats for the game, total yards, we have App State with 415, and Coastal Carolina with just 369, 22-16 first down edge. So a very misleading foul, and Coastal's off. But it was also a big game. And who do they have on deck? They have Liberty. Liberty only has one loss all year by a single point. Liberty was ranked last week. You knew that when they were looking at App State, they were also thinking about Liberty because Liberty was unbeaten last week. And this week they're only playing Texas State. So, I mean, it should be a pretty easy game, right? Now, look at, they've only met twice. Coastal Carolina won last year. And when you click right here, click on the team name, that shows you the last 23 years. Now, these teams haven't met much. I'll show you last 23 years. That's better later. But they only beat them by 3 last year, and they lost by 20 in 2017. So it's not like they've dominated the series. And then let's take a look at how Texas State has done this year against the big boys. They've played pretty well. In fact, they played SMU and only lost by 7. They played Boston College and only lost by 3. They played Louisiana, who's going to be in the Sun Belt Championship game, only lost by 10. They did lose to App State by 21, but look at the yards, 420 to 426. They were only outgained by 6 yards. In fact, they were outgained by 6 yards by App State. Coastal Carolina was outgained by 46 yards by App State. So this is a decent Texas State team. Texas State is coming in here. They just beat Arkansas State last week, so they've got some momentum. You look at the fact that they've had a pretty rough season, but hardly any. They've had one blowout loss all year. That was to BYU, but everybody loses to BYU big. So they're in a good situation. They're fired up. It's their final game. They're catching Coastal in a sandwich. Coastal's off a misleading final. And Texas State's getting 17. Plus Texas State's 2-0 against the spread in the series. So add it all up. My situational game, I'm going to take Texas State plus 17 over Coastal Carolina. Now, you hear me talking about my newsletter inside the press box all the time, and you wonder how it's doing. Last week, another big winning week. This is what the selection page looks like, and I can't show you here, but inside the press box, you click on the game, and it takes you right to the complete forecast for the game. You get my computer score on the game. You get my score on the game. Last week, we did lose with Oregon over UCLA. In fact, UCLA had a good chance of beating them at the end. A very poor game for Oregon. But the other games last week, we had San Diego State, an outright upset winner over Nevada. We had LSU. They got past Arkansas. They were minus 1.5 or 2. They won the game by 3. Northwestern, an outright upset winner over Wisconsin, and that was a 2-star play. Oklahoma blew out Oklahoma State. You knew that thing was over 10 minutes into the game. And Oregon State, an outright upset winner over Cal. And once again, a 2-star play. So we had a bunch of 2 stars last week. They did extremely well. We had 3 two-star plays last week. All 3 of them were winners. And Inside the Press Box went 5-1 on the week. And Inside the Press Box for the year, I mention it now because I'm going to forget to mention it to you later when we're going through all these games. But you can get a discount on Inside the Press Box. It's 23-11, 68% the last 6 weeks in college. If you go to the store at philsteele.com and type in the code word football is back at your purchase, you'll get $20 off any of these subscriptions. The rest of the college, which takes you all the way through December 19th, is just $74. That's 4 issues, $80 value, $74, but take $20 off, you get it for $54. NFL, there's even more than 4 weeks left there. Inside the Press Box postseason is $89. With this code, you get it for $69. Phil Steele Plus, you get that included with your subscription. And if you purchase them all separate, it'd be $301. Get the pigskin package. And in the bundle, you'll get all this: the college regular season, NFL regular season, postseason, Phil Steele Plus, all of it together, a $301 value. Right now, it's just, if you go to the store at philsteele.com, once again, we'll click to the home page and go to the store over here. And when you go to the store, you would click on the full season. That's FCS Access. Let's get the full season one. Here it is, NFL and college. Click there. You see it's $179. Type in this code word, Elite Member. When you type in Elite Member, you take $50 off. You get it for just $129. So for $129, you get the final 4 issues of my college, all the NFL issues, the postseason, 4 bowl, 4 playoff issues, and Phil Steele Plus, all for $129. And like I said, Press Box on fire, 23-11, 68%. Another nice 5-1 week last week. All right, let's get to your next game. It's Texas Tech at Oklahoma State. Let's take a look at that one and see why I've got that one highlighted. I want to show you, this one is the last 23 years I want to point out in this one. And it doesn't necessarily include all 23 years, but you think Oklahoma State, you think Texas Tech. Now, who's won the last 4 years? You got to figure Oklahoma State's won and won big, because Texas Tech hasn't really had winning records. Oklahoma State's been a really good team. Let's go see who's done what. We click on Texas Tech, Oklahoma State. Now, when you read this chart, first of all, it tells you how the home team does out here. The word win means they won the game straight up. Green means the home team covered. So as you can see, the visitor has actually covered 5 of the last 7 games. And there's been upsets the last 2 years. This shows you the scores of the game. Oklahoma State had done very well straight up in the series. But the last 4 years, they've only won by a point. They've won by 7 points. They've lost by 24. Texas Tech won, and Texas Tech won by 10. So Texas Tech won their last trip here, 41-17. They won last year. They've covered 4 in a row in the series. And this green out here, if the fact it doesn't have a minus sign means Texas Tech's pretty much been the underdog. Last time they were favored was here, 2010. But the green means they covered. The green here means that they won the game outright. The red means that you lost the game outright. And this just shows you Oklahoma State's been able to run the ball, but naturally Texas Tech's been able to pass the ball. Look at the yardage Texas Tech's been putting up. 549, 512, 642, 518, 621, 586. So I like all those numbers. And last year was a Matt Wells versus Mike Gundy meeting. Now, Oklahoma State is also off their big game against Oklahoma last week. Now, another thing I want to point out is the individual player stats. And once again, if we go to look at last week's game against Baylor, I love these box scores, and you go through it, we're going to see that Baylor led this game 20-6, and that was late in the third quarter. Well, what changed? How did Texas Tech come back and win the game? Let's go through the play-by-play of the game real quick. That's the second quarter, and we go to the third quarter, and in the third quarter, here's your Baylor touchdown, which makes it 20-6. Texas Tech had Columbia quarterback, one more. Columbia took over for the starter for Bowman. Went 3 and out again. Baylor was intercepted. Texas Tech brings in Bowman. That was the difference. Bowman comes off the bench. Now, pick up your magazine. Look at the Texas Tech page. I had Bowman as one of the top quarterbacks in the Big 12, and he got benched early in the season. Bowman comes off the bench. Touchdown. Bowman comes off the bench. 23 field goal, short field goal. Bowman still off the bench. They come down here. Touchdown. Texas Tech, field goal. Texas Tech, field goal. Texas Tech wins the game 24-23 and led by Alan Bowman. Look at this, 30-yard pass. They lost 5-30, 4-9. Pass. Bowman's doing a good job, brings them in. Now, if you look under individual stats, it'll talk about what I've been talking about here. Bowman began the year as starter. He played against Texas. Then against Kansas State, he got benched and went with Henry Columbia, the Utah State transfer. Columbia's been in the majority of the rest of the year. And he was hitting 9 of 15 for 76. Bowman comes off the bench, finally. He's VHT. He's a quarterback that can move this squad, 181 yards. Another thing I want to point out, let's take a look at Spencer Sanders, Oklahoma State's quarterback this year. He's got 5 touchdown passes. He's got Tylan Wallace, Dylan Stoner. They've got the weapons. How come he's only got 5 touchdown passes? Meanwhile, Bowman has only played in a couple of games. He's got 7 touchdown passes this year. So I like that. Yes, Oklahoma State's got the defensive edge, but look at the last 2 games. They gave up 370 yards to Kansas State, 53 yards above what Kansas State usually gains. They gave up 492 yards to Oklahoma. And look at Texas Tech's defense the last 2 weeks. 343 yards, 360 yards. They're actually playing pretty decent. So if you look at the fact that Oklahoma State's off a big game against Oklahoma, they were thinking Big 12 championship. That loss basically eliminated them for the Big 12 championship. They've got a head-up loss to Oklahoma, a head-up loss to Texas. Both those 2 teams are ahead of them. Oklahoma State really does not have a chance because Iowa State's only got 1 loss. So if Iowa State beats Texas this week, they'll still have a game advantage on Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State's probably not going to make the Big 12 title game. That's a bubble burst situation. Texas Tech has played well against Oklahoma State. Bowman's got 7 touchdown passes. Likely he'll be back as a starter. And you've got Texas Tech fresh off a bye. How about that? These guys are off bedlam. These guys are off a bye. And Texas Tech knows they can play with them. They're desperate. They're 3-5. Now, if they beat Oklahoma State and beat Kansas, if I'm Matt Wells, I'm telling them, look, you get to 5-5. You get to a bowl game. This is a massive game for Texas Tech. Oklahoma State's massive game was last week, Bedlam. We're taking Texas Tech plus 11.5 over Oklahoma State. All right, let's go to another one now. And for this one, we're going to take a look at App State, and they are facing Troy. So we're going to put Troy on the left because they're the visitor and line them up there. And we're going to put App State over here on the right and line them up here because they're the home team. Now, App State's off that game against Coastal. I'm not going to go through it again. I showed it to you. It's a misleading final. They led Coastal, a very strong Coastal team. But now they're done. They can't win their division. Coastal would have to lose twice. They only got 1 more game in the division. So App State's eliminated. They have nothing, but pride to play for. But one thing I want to talk about with App State is how they do off a loss. And this is where your magazine can even come in handy. So let's go take a look at your magazine right. Look at all the information on this page for starters. You can't get this amount of information on any other team. This is on every 130 teams. This is an angle on every single game. Here, you can see App State holds a 4-1 record over Troy. Their lone loss coming in 2016. How about that? They're 6-0 in the SBC home finals. Now, one thing I want to show you here is the record off a straight-up loss. 1-0, 2-0, 2-2, 2-1, 2-0. So in the last 5 years, 3-0, 5-2, 6-3, 7-3. Now, one of those games was a loss to an FCS school here. Savannah State, they only beat them by 50 or 47. They were laying 51. We're not going to count that. We're only going to count FBS games. So that's 7-2 coming into the year. Now, you can look here, off straight-up loss in your magazine for that. And by the way, Zach Thomas is back for App State. Or you could just look right here. Last year, they lost to Georgia Southern. The next week, they bounced back and upset South Carolina. Do you see the bold, unbold here? The non-bold means you didn't win the game. So they didn't beat Georgia Southern. They bounced back and go into Coastal Carolina and win by 16. Cover. UMass, they lost. They did lose the next week to ULM. But then they bounced back and beat Georgia Southern. Here, they lost to Tennessee. They cover against Old Dominion. They lose to Miami. They cover at Akron. They were only a 5.5-point favorite against Akron 4 years ago. What a line be on that game now. At Troy, they lost. They bounced back. And here's one of the non-covers. They only won by 25, laying 25.5. So you have a half-point non-cover. Clemson, they lose. They cover. And Arkansas State, they lose. They cover. And this year could be applicable as well. They lost to Marshall and covered against Campbell. So App State off a loss is always a solid play. And then the other thing you're looking at here, it's an App State team that's plus 114 yards per game. Troy is only plus 11 yards per game. In fact, in the last 4 weeks, check out this one here. It takes just the last 4 weeks into account, gives you current form on the team. They're plus 80 yards per game, playing at a level of 92.9. They're playing at -1, but it should be a fierce App State team off a rare loss. As you can tell by that chart, they do not have very many losses in the course of a season, and when they do lose, they bounce back with wins. So we're going to use that as a play. We're going to use App State -13.5 over Troy in that one. And how about those magazine pages? How much information can you pack on a page? I don't believe in white space. I just like info. Last 7 years stats. Here's game by game. Here's the individual players, bold returning, non-bold, not returning that. And here's every single game. Were they ranked? Here's where they were ranked. Here's where their opponent was ranked. It's all there, every page. And here's how they do in bowl games as well. Hey, App State does pretty well in bowls. That's 5-0 right there. All right, so now let's get to your next game. We're going to take a look at Florida State plus the points over Virginia. Now, Florida State's at home for this game, and Virginia is on the road. So we're going to put Virginia on the left, and we're going to put Florida State on the right. First thing I want to take a look at, naturally, would be the last 23 years. And by the way, when you look at Florida State, these team pages go all the way down. 2019, 2018. You want to find out how individual players did in a game in 2018? There it is, game by game, every single game in 18, 17, 16, 15, and stats all the way back. All this information, you want to look anything up, it's there. I accumulate the stats, I put them on there for me for the current season. Why not keep them on for past seasons? And a lot of times I find it very helpful. Look at this. Florida State used to be a good team. Look at all these green numbers. Very few red numbers. And that's just 2013. Here, red starts popping up on defense. A lot of green numbers here. Good season. A lot of green numbers here. Good season. Red numbers start popping up. Red numbers start popping up a lot. And red numbers are happening last year, and red numbers are happening this year. But I think Florida State can actually win this game for a couple of reasons. First of all, let's take a look at the history. If you want to look at the history, you just click on to Virginia. There's your last 23 years. Look at this. Florida State's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 3 straight up in the series. Now let's look at their losses. Their losses have been by 7, by 1, and by 5. The current spread this year, Florida State's a 9.5-point dog. So in the last 23 years, Florida State has never lost by more than a touchdown to Virginia. And let's take a look at last year's game. Now, last year we weren't using College Press Box. We compiled our own box scores, but we could still show you what happened in last year's game against Virginia. And where is that? It's right up here. Florida State was a dog. They were getting, what were they getting in that game? Let's take a look at the Virginia one. Oh, that one's unloaded. I think they were getting 7.5, and they were a dog in this game. But take a look at the score. Florida State scores a touchdown, leads 24-17. Virginia gets a touchdown with 6:02 left, but they miss the extra point. Florida State's still leading the game. Then Virginia goes down and scores with 2:34 left to go ahead by 7 with the 2-point conversion. Florida State got down to the 3-yard line and got stopped. It was a quarterback draw by Blackman, and they got stopped on that one late in the game, and they came up just short. But they could easily have won that game at Virginia. And one thing I want to show you with Virginia here. I'm going to click on, once again, what we have in the magazine. And this makes it pretty easy. The magazine's just loaded with information. Let's take a look at the straight-up records. Virginia is a much better team at home. 7-0, 5-1, 4-3. So in the last 3 years, 9-4, and then 7-0 is 16-4. And look at this year. Home win, home loss, home win, home win, home win. 4-1 at home. Now let's take a look at their record on the road. 2-3, 1-4, 2-4. These guys are 3-8, 5-11 on the road. How about this year? 5-12, 5-13, 5-14. Haven't won a road game. They even lost at Wake Forest by 17. So you have a Virginia team that's nowhere near as good on the road as they are at home. It's obvious. All you have to do is open your magazine. You see it firsthand. Now they're laying 9.5 to Virginia or to Florida State in this game. Florida State owns this series. Their biggest loss has been by 7 in the last 23 years. And add it all up. I'm going to take the points with Florida State this week, plus the 9.5 at home where Virginia doesn't play as well. They're not as strong a team on the road as they are at home. So we're going to take Florida State plus 9.5 over Virginia. All right, let's get to the next game. North Carolina and Notre Dame. I want to show you a little bit what PressBox is about. This is the bottom part of the sheet for PressBox, and what it has my computer forecasts on every game. And I'll be honest with you guys, I don't always agree with my computer. We have some arguments sometimes. I'll disagree. I'll pick the other team. The computer will pick one team. But for the most part, we agree. And I like it when the computer agrees with me. And coming into this one, I thought North Carolina was going to give Notre Dame a challenge. What does my computer think? My computer's got the game 40-40, with North Carolina having a 471 to 466 yard edge. I like that. Here's my complete write-up on the game. everything you need to know about it. And as I mentioned, I do talk about yards per game, how they are plus yards per game, what their record is on the road, etc. I'm calling North Carolina 41-40. And that's not one of my best bets. My best bets, like I said, have got that record on Press Box. This was the best bets last week, 5-1. You got to love those. I remember last week I told you I gave you another best bet. It was Oregon State last week, wasn't it? Outright upset winner. You got to love that. I'm not giving away a free Press Box this week, but Press Box is 23-11. Single copies are $20 right now, or get the rest of the college season for $54 when you type in the code football is back. But anyway, back to this. This is what you get on every game, not just the top games, but every game. So you can see where my computer has the yards rushing, yards passing, points, everything. We're going to call for the upset. North Carolina plus the 5 over Notre Dame. Computer forecast is there. Notre Dame's going to be without a couple of offensive linemen as well. And another thing I want to point out about North Carolina, something you can pick up easy looking at the Phil Steele Plus, is the trends of a team. Let's take a look at North Carolina over here real quick. They win their first game big. They don't cover here. They win their game against Virginia Tech. They lose to Florida State. They win their game against NC State. They lose to Virginia. They bury Duke. They barely get past Wake Forest. It's time for their up week. So it's North Carolina's up week. The computer says it's going to be close. They're getting 5 at home. Let's call for the upset. Take North Carolina plus 5 over Notre Dame to upset them outright. Your final college game I'm going to take a look at. And I talked to you about Press Box. A couple of those Press Box losses were high-scoring games of the week. And it seems like every time I put out a high-scoring game of the week, quarterback gets injured second quarter, something happens like that, and the high-scoring game has lost this year. It's been disappointing. I think it's like 1-3. So I stopped putting them in inside the Press Box. I'm concerned about the record. But I brought one of the high-scoring games over here to Phil Steele Plus, and I won. I'm going to bring one back, and it's a fun game. It's Thanksgiving, or it's normally on Thanksgiving. It's not this year. It's Mississippi State against Mississippi. And my high-scoring game of the week, we're going to go with over. Now, you guys know Ole Miss is an over team. 59-42, 54-21. All their games, they're averaging 41-41, 82 points in a game. So is there a question Ole Miss is an over team? No. The total is 68. You automatically think if Ole Miss is playing a game, it can go over 68. Heck, they're averaging 82 yards per game. Their offense, 177 yards above what their opponents allow. But their defense gives up 143 yards above what their opponents normally gain. Look at this red over here. Look at this green over here. You could tell an over team at a glance. Green, red, over. If this was green and this was red, that would be an under team. Now we'll take a little bit closer look at Mississippi State. I was just watching that this morning, the Mississippi State-Georgia game. And Mississippi State's been, after that 639 yards against LSU played man defense on them. They lit them up. Everybody's been playing zone defense again on them. And look at this. 400, 295, 217, 200, 204. Now, you would expect with this type of offensive production, playing one of the best defenses in the country, that Mississippi State was not going to score last week. Something happened to the offense. Mike Leach said the offense is starting to catch on. And look at this. They threw the ball 52 times. And when you throw the ball, the clock stops a lot. First downs, stops for incomplete passes, get a lot more plays in the game. As you can tell here, 74 plays for them. So you've got a team that threw the ball a lot and put up 358 yards against Georgia, 12 yards above their season average. Now, Mississippi State was playing good ball here on defense at the start of the year. But look at this. Red, 499. Red, 478. Vanderbilt was averaging 334 yards in every game besides Mississippi State. They got 478. Even Georgia threw for 401 yards on them last week. So it's a Mississippi State defense that's showing some flaws. They only had 50 players available last week. It's an offense that's starting to catch stride under Will Rogers. If we look at Will Rogers, he took over as quarterback here. They won the game against Vandy, and they put up 24 or 27. Put up 24 against Georgia's defense. Now they're taking on Mississippi's defense, which says, here, there's the end zone. Just score quick so we can score. And Mississippi, of course, goes on a fast-paced offense. So you look at these two teams, I think Mississippi State's offense starting to come on. It's Mike Leach against Lane Kiffin. They both want to show they're the smartest man in the room. They want their offense to do well. And the total for a Mississippi game is cheap at 68. So I'm going to go with over 68 as my high-scoring game of the week. Mississippi State's offense starting to score. Their defense showing some signs. And Mississippi's a pure over team. Over 68. Mississippi State, Ole Miss. Have some fun with that on Saturday. Let's wrap it up with your NFL game this week. NFL hasn't been doing well the last couple weeks, but I think we got a winner this week because everything lines up on this game. I mean, everything lines up on this game. We're going to put Tennessee over here on the left, and we are going to put Indianapolis over here on the right. It's a battle for the division showdown. Winner basically wins this division this year. And first of all, I like to have the team that's playing stronger statistically, okay? Well, Indianapolis is plus 75 yards per game. Tennessee is minus 10 yards per game. They got the same record. They're outgaining their opponents by 75 yards per game. They're getting outgained by 10 yards per game. Can someone say value? That's one nice thing. We take a look at the NFL team page, or not the NFL team pages. Go to the home page over here. Click on NFL. And what we can see is under the offensive yards per game versus defensive yards per game, Tennessee, or Indianapolis, I should say, is up here at number 6. They are plus 49 yards per game above what their opponent's average. That's this column's out here. Here's your offensive average. They are -1, but they're holding opponents at 51 below their season average. Tennessee is minus 20 yards per game over here. So once again, if we go to the team page under NFL and we go to team pages and we click on Tennessee, you will see that Tennessee is plus 21 on offense, but minus 42 on defense. Look at all these red numbers they've got on the defensive side of the ball. Phillip Rivers should be able to throw the ball here. So you've got the better team statistically in this one. You've got the one that ranks at the top of the chart. And then you take a look at the series history. So now for series history, just like the college, click on it right here. Look at all this. Indianapolis, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 3 straight up against Tennessee. So they've dominated the series. So now you get the series history, check. And the last thing we're going to look at, I put out a scorebook. Scorebook's available at the store. But how did the Colts do against the division? Well, under Frank Reich, as a home favorite against the division, 2-0, 1-0-1. They are 3-0-1 as a favorite, home favorite against the division. They're a home favorite. They're only a 3-point favorite. So I like that. Now we're going to take a look at Tennessee. So angle-wise, you got one angle locked in for Indianapolis. Good. If you find me a bad angle on Tennessee, we got all 5 factors working for us. Division game away dog, Tennessee, 1-2, 0-2, 0-3, 0-3, 0-6, 0-8, 1-8 as an underdog in their division. 1-8 against the spread as an underdog in their division. 3-0-1 as a home favorite in the division. So the angles match up. You've got a positive statistical team against a negative statistical team coming up, and you've got the series domination. Add it all up, we're going with the Indianapolis Colts, -3 over Thanksgiving. There you go, 8 big plays for you. Hope you learned a little bit about how to use Phil Steele Plus, and I hope you and your family have a great Thanksgiving, and let's bring home some winners this weekend. We got 8 plays. Let's go for 8-0 this week and see what we're doing. I'll be back with you next week with your Phil Steele Plus tour, and once again, happy Thanksgiving.